There are moments in your life that feel like you're trapped inside a snow globe. You're standing still, watching everything swirl around you. The laughter, the lights, the warmth, but you can't feel any of it. You can't hear it. You're separated by an invisible layer of glass, and the only thing you can do is watch. That's what it felt like for me on Christmas Eve. I was Justin, a 58-year-old man who had spent his entire life believing that the foundation of family was unshakable. I built my world around that belief. I worked double shifts to buy my son the gaming console he wanted. I spent weekends coaching his little league team, and I sat through hours of his piano recitals, clapping until my hands were sore. I was the dad who showed up. But on that Christmas Eve, I was the dad who had been told to stay away. The call came 3 days before Christmas. I remember the exact time because I was in the middle of wrapping a present for my son, Dylan. His wife's name is Amelia, and Dylan had my voice on the other end of the line. He was my only son, my pride and joy, but his voice, usually so bright, was hollow, almost robotic. "Dad," he said, and there was a heavy pause. He had that tone you use when you're about to deliver bad news, the tone that makes your stomach drop out from under you. "Dad, we've been talking, and we think it's best if you sit this Christmas out." I remember the silence that followed. I think I stopped breathing for a full 10 seconds. "What do you mean, sit it out?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He explained that Amelia's parents, Richard and Patricia, were coming into town. They were very traditional, very set in their ways. He said that the dynamic would be uncomfortable. "Dad, it's just this 1 year," he pleaded. "Amelia's mom, she gets anxiety when there are too many people, and having you there, it'll just make things weird for them. She needs to feel comfortable. We're just asking for this 1 year, just to make her family feel comfortable." Let me tell you about Richard and Patricia. They were the kind of people who looked at me like I was the help at a country club. They were wealthy, refined, and they never let me forget that I was just a mechanic who had worked his way up from nothing. I was the blue-collar dad who smelled like grease and sweat when I picked Dylan up from his private school. Even though I had cleaned up the best I could, I was always nice to them. I brought the best wine I could afford to their dinner parties, and I listened politely while Richard lectured me about the stock market. But I knew how they saw me. They saw me as the liability. And Dylan, my own son, was telling me that my presence was a liability to his wife's comfort. "Okay, Dylan," I said. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. What was the point? When your own child tells you that your existence is an inconvenience, you don't fight it. You just accept it. You swallow the pain because you think that's what love is. "Okay, son. I'll see you in the new year." He sounded relieved. "Thanks, Dad. I love you." He said the words, but they felt hollow. He loved me from a distance. He loved me enough to call me, but he didn't love me enough to stand up for me. Christmas morning came, and I woke up in an empty house. It was just me, the silence, and the stack of presents I had bought for Dylan and his wife that were now sitting in my closet, unwrapped. I didn't put up a tree that year. I couldn't stand the sight of the twinkling lights reminding me of all the Christmases when I would wake Dylan up at the crack of dawn, watching his eyes light up when he saw the presents. I spent the day alone. I had a turkey breast in the freezer and I cooked it. I made a simple dinner for one. And then I made the mistake. I opened my phone. I just wanted to see if Dylan had sent me a text. Instead, I opened Instagram. I scrolled through my feed and I saw it. Amelia had posted a series of photos. It was a collection of a perfect Christmas dinner. A golden, glazed ham on a crystal platter. A beautifully set table with fine china. Her parents, Richard and Patricia, were there, smiling smugly. Amelia's sister and her husband were there, raising a toast. There were pictures of Dylan carving the turkey, a wide smile on his face, a smile I hadn't seen in years. And then I saw the photo that broke me. It was a group shot. Everyone was gathered around the fireplace. Everyone was wearing matching ugly Christmas sweaters. Everyone was smiling. They looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. And I realized that I was the one who had been cropped out of the family portrait. I was the kid who wasn't picked for the team. I was the uncle who wasn't invited to the wedding. I was the old, broken piece of furniture that was thrown out to make room for something better. My own son was part of that picture. He was happy. It's just this 1 year, he had said. But looking at that photo, I realized it wasn't just about this year. He had chosen them. I sat there, alone in my silent kitchen, eating my dry turkey breast. I couldn't taste a thing. The food was ash in my mouth. I just stared at that photo on my phone, watching the smiles of the people who had replaced me. I felt the anger rising, a hot, bitter rage that I had never allowed myself to feel before. I had spent my whole life being the bigger person, the understanding dad, the guy who always let things slide. But this wasn't sliding. This was a betrayal. It was a cold, calculated act of rejection. I looked at that photo, and something snapped. It was in that moment that the snow globe shattered, and I was no longer just a passive observer. The pain became the fuel. I was about to throw the half-eaten dinner in the trash. I couldn't stand to look at it. My phone was dark, the screen a reflection of my own tired, broken face. And then I heard it, a knock at the door. It was just past 9 o'clock on Christmas night. It was cold, and there was a gentle snow falling outside. I shuffled to the door, my heart heavy, thinking it might be a neighbor, or maybe a delivery person who was lost. I had no idea what was waiting for me on the other side. When I opened the door, the cold air hit me, but it was nothing compared to the shock I felt when I saw who was standing there. It was Dylan. He wasn't in his Christmas sweater anymore. He was wearing a thin jacket, and his face was blotchy and red. His eyes were swollen, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. He looked like a lost little boy, a far cry from the man I had seen smiling in the Instagram photos just an hour before. He was trembling, and not just from the cold. "Dad," he choked out, his voice raw and broken. He looked at me like he was looking at a ghost, like he was seeing a life raft in the middle of a storm. He rushed inside, not waiting for an invitation. He fell into my arms, sobbing. He held on to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had just fallen apart. He told me everything. He told me that the family dinner had been a nightmare. Amelia's parents had spent the entire evening making snide remarks about him. "Oh, Dylan, how's the mechanic business going?" Richard had said, sneering. "I suppose it's a steady income if you like getting your hands dirty." Patricia had made comments about his simple education. They treated him like an employee, not the man who was married to their daughter. They belittled his job, his home, his life choices. But it got worse. Dylan said that Amelia didn't defend him. She just sat there, sipping her wine, nodding along. She was more concerned with her mother's anxiety than her husband's dignity. And then the final straw. Dylan had served the turkey, and Richard had said, "It's a bit dry, isn't it? Not like the ones we get at the club." He said it just loud enough for everyone to hear. Dylan said he felt something inside him snap. He looked around the table at all of them, his wife, her parents, her sister, and all he saw was a pack of wolves who had been waiting for the chance to tear him apart. They saw him as the outsider, the kid from the wrong side of the tracks who was never going to be good enough. He told me he couldn't stay. He told Amelia he was leaving. She didn't try to stop him. She didn't chase after him. He walked out of that perfect, beautiful, pristine house that was filled with people who were laughing at him, and he walked to my house. He walked for miles in the snow. He walked away from his wife, from her family, and from the life he thought he wanted. He came back to me. He came back to the only person he knew would never make him feel like he was less than. "They don't see me," he cried into my shoulder. "They don't see me at all, Dad. They just see my job, my salary, my house. They see me as a fraud." As I held my son, the sadness I had been feeling, the loneliness and the rejection, it all transformed. It didn't go away, it just changed shape. It hardened into a cold, steely resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my son. They had made him feel like he was nothing. They had bullied him, not in a schoolyard, but at his own Christmas table. And my daughter-in-law, the woman he had chosen, had let it happen. She had orchestrated it. She had pushed me out to make room for this circus, and then she had let her parents tear apart the man who had given her everything. I didn't offer him a solution. I didn't tell him it would be okay. I just said, "Stay here, son. Don't go back." I put him to bed in his old room. He was asleep within minutes. exhausted from the emotional toll of the night. But I couldn't sleep. I sat there in the living room, looking at the phone screen, at that stupid, perfect Christmas photo. And I started to think. I wasn't a man of wealth or influence. I couldn't get them fired or sue them for emotional distress. But I had one thing they didn't have. I knew who they really were, and I knew who I was. I was the man who had raised the son they had just humiliated. The next morning, before Dylan woke up, I made a call. I called a lawyer. Not a big, fancy lawyer, but a tough one. A bulldog. I told him my plan. He was quiet for a moment, and then he laughed. "That's not the usual revenge," he said. "But I think you might be onto something, Justin. It's poetic." I knew what Dylan needed. He needed to remember who he was. He needed to see that his father wasn't the liability they thought I was. He needed to see that there was value in where he came from. I spent the next few days working. Dylan tried to talk to Amelia, but she refused to answer his calls. She was probably being told by her mother to let him sweat. That was their game. They wanted to break him. They wanted him to crawl back and apologize for being sensitive. Dylan was a mess. He felt worthless. "Maybe they're right, Dad," he said one night. "Maybe I'm just a mechanic's son who got lucky. Maybe I'm not good enough." That was the moment I knew my plan had to work. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about saving my son's soul. I pulled the plan together. It was simple, but it was devastating. A week later, I called Amelia. To my surprise, she answered. "Hello, Justin," she said, her voice cool and detached, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't get angry. I was calm. I was the calm before the storm. "Amelia," I said, "I want to invite you, your parents, and your sister to a small gathering. At my house. I think we should all talk. I think we need to clear the air." She hesitated. For Dylan, I added. She agreed. She probably thought I was going to grovel, to beg for her family's approval. The thought almost made me laugh. They came on a Saturday afternoon. Richard, Patricia, Amelia, her sister, and her husband. They showed up in their expensive car and walked into my small, humble home. They looked around, sneering at the worn-out couch, the simple decorations, the framed photo of me and Dylan at his high school graduation. "This is quaint," Patricia said, a fake smile plastered on her face. They all sat down in my living room, looking so out of place it was almost comical. They were perched on my furniture like they were afraid they would catch something. Dylan was there. He was pale and nervous. He had no idea what I was about to do. "So, Justin," Richard started, leaning back with an air of superiority. "I assume you want to discuss the misunderstanding at Christmas." He said it like it was a joke. It's really a shame Dylan got so upset over a little constructive criticism. I looked at them, all of them, the smug smiles, the patronizing eyes. I took a deep breath. "You're right," I said. "I did want to get everyone here to talk. But first, I have a presentation I'd like to share." I had set up my old projector. I dimmed the lights. I started the film. But it wasn't a family video. It was the video I had been working on for the past week. It was a video of my life. The screen showed pictures of me in my grease-stained coveralls, working on a car engine. It showed my high school diploma, worn and faded. Then, it showed a picture of me holding a tiny, screaming baby. "This is Dylan," I narrated. "Born to a single father who had just lost his job." The slideshow continued. It showed a series of photos. The tiny apartment we lived in, me cooking dinner in a small, cramped kitchen, me reading stories to a young Dylan in a tiny bedroom with one window, the beat-up car I drove for 15 years because I couldn't afford a new one. "I worked odd jobs," I said. "I worked as a night janitor, a delivery driver, anything I could do to put food on the table. People used to tell me I wasn't good enough. They said I was a loser. They said Dylan would never amount to anything." The slide changed. It was a picture of Dylan receiving a scholarship. "And then this happened," I continued. "My son worked his way through college. He studied late into the night. He didn't get a handout. He didn't have a trust fund." I turned to Richard and Patricia. I looked them straight in the eye. "You look at him and you see a mechanic's son," I said. "You look at me and you see someone beneath you. I see it in the way you speak to him. I saw it in the way you treated him at Christmas. The last slide came up. It was a picture of a bank statement. The balance was modest, but it was clear. I don't have a lot of money, I said. I don't have a house in the Hamptons or a membership to a country club. I have this. I looked at Dylan, who was crying silently. I have a son who, despite everything I couldn't give him, became a good, kind, hardworking man. You, with all your money and your status, you have a daughter who is so insecure, so afraid of your disapproval, that she let you tear her husband apart. I turned to Amelia. You told my son to ask me not to come to Christmas so your family could feel comfortable. You told him it was just 1 year. But look at them. Do you really think they'll ever be comfortable with him? Look at the way they look at him. They despise him. And you chose them. You chose to sit there and let them humiliate him. You didn't defend him. You didn't protect him. You gave him up to make them comfortable. The silence in the room was suffocating. I had done it. I had laid their hypocrisy bare. Richard stood up, his face red. This is absurd, he sputtered. This is a cheap, pathetic attempt to make us feel guilty for our success. You're bitter. You're a jealous old man who couldn't provide for his own son, and now you're lashing out. He was trying to turn it around, trying to make me the villain. But he had underestimated me. I wasn't just a bitter man. I was a father who had just put a lifetime of love on display, and I had the eyes of everyone in that room locked on me. Look in the mirror, Richard, I said, my voice low but strong. You see a successful man. I see a man who is so deeply insecure that he has to tear down a kid half his age to feel good about himself. You see a refined family. I see a group of vultures who peck at anyone who isn't wearing the right clothes. And you, I said, turning to Patricia, you see a son-in-law who isn't good enough for you. But the truth is, he was never the problem. You are. You are the problem. You raised a daughter who is so terrified of being seen as less than that she married a good man just to ruin him. I could see the words hit them. They were seeing themselves, truly seeing themselves, for the first time. My son, Dylan, stood up. He was shaking. He walked over to Amelia, who was crying now, but it wasn't a cry of remorse. It was a cry of a spoiled woman who was finally being told the truth. Why, Amelia? He asked her, his voice broken. Why did you let them do that to me? Why didn't you stand up for me? Amelia couldn't even look at him. She looked at her mother, waiting for her to tell her what to say. It was the confirmation we needed. She wasn't a wife. She was an extension of her parents. I was just trying to make everyone happy, she sobbed. He asked me to be comfortable, Dylan said, looking at me. He asked me to leave my father out in the cold to make you comfortable. He shook his head. I was so scared of losing you that I didn't realize I was losing myself. He turned to me. I'm sorry, Dad. I am so sorry. I held my son. I felt the tears on my own cheeks. It's okay, son, I whispered. It's over now. The family left. They didn't say a word. They just gathered their things, avoided eye contact, and walked out the door. A few days later, Amelia and her parents tried to spin the story. They told their friends I was a toxic, bitter old man who had ruined their holiday. They tried to paint themselves as the victims. But something had changed. Dylan had changed. He didn't fight them. He didn't try to win Amelia back. He just filed for divorce. He wasn't angry anymore, he was just done. He realized that the love he had been fighting for wasn't really love at all. It was a transaction. The following year, I got a call from him. Dad, he said. He didn't sound sad anymore. He sounded like himself. Can I come over for Christmas? Just you and me? I think I finally know how to cook a turkey. My heart swelled. It was the best Christmas present I could have ever asked for. We spent the day together. We ate burnt turkey and undercooked mashed potatoes. We watched classic movies. We talked until the sun came up. It wasn't the perfect picture from the Instagram post of the year before, but it was real. It was ours. Looking back, I realized that the lesson wasn't about revenge. The revenge wasn't in the humiliation I inflicted on them. The revenge was in the truth. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to show my son the truth so he could see the truth about himself. In the end, they didn't lose a son-in-law or a daughter. They lost their power. Their control was based on the fear of being seen as less than. When I refused to be intimidated, when I refused to bow down to their wealth, they didn't know how to handle it. They were left with nothing but their own miserable, empty lives. My son learned that being enough doesn't mean having enough. It means being true to yourself. It means knowing your worth even when other people try to make you feel worthless. As for me, I learned that being a father doesn't stop when your child grows up. You are always their lighthouse. You are always their safe harbor. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for your child is not to fight their battles for them, but to show them who they really are so they can fight for themselves. And that, my friends, is the most powerful gift a parent can give. A few years have passed since that Christmas. Dylan is a happy man. He started his own business, a small engine repair shop, just like his old man. He's his own boss and he's good at it. He has a new partner, a wonderful woman who loves him for exactly who he is. She doesn't care about his pedigree or his bank account. She cares about his heart. We have Christmas together every year now. It's not a big, fancy party. It's just me, Dylan, and his new family. The decorations are handmade, and the food is simple. But it's full of laughter, love, and the kind of comfort that money can't buy. The picture I see on social media these days is different. It's not a picture of a perfect, staged dinner. It's a picture of my son smiling. Not a forced smile, but a real one. It's a picture of us together. No one is cropped out. No one is invisible. In that new picture, we are all included. And I realized that I didn't need to take revenge on Amelia's family. I just needed to show my son the way home. And once he saw the truth, he walked there himself. Because sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't the one that is done to you, but the one you do to yourself when you let someone else define your worth. And the greatest victory is taking that power back.